bombed from the air, but by whose planes was not clear. They were among an estimated 3,000 more civilians forced to flee Kosovo overnight. What is clear is that the suffering of these people continues. What is not clear is how NATO can help them and their countrymen left behind, without, in the short term at least, making their predicament worse. Jim Fish, BBC News.
NATO says it did drop bomb on civilian vehicle.
America says military action could continue into the summer.
Jack Straw decides General Pinochet will... NATO has admitted in the last few minutes that its preliminary inquiries show one of its aircraft did mistakenly drop a bomb on a civilian vehicle in a convoy of refugees. The Foreign Secretary, Robin Cook, said earlier that it was impossible to guarantee accidents would not happen, but put the blame firmly on President Milosevic for causing the conflict. Here are the major developments.
Serb officials say NATO planes killed 64 people in the attack. NATO says Serb military or police vehicles may have been in or around the convoy. It's been interviewing the pilots and examining cockpit video footage to try to establish exactly what happened.
NATO airstrikes on Yugoslavia could continue into the summer, United States officials said today. People in Belgrade are reporting that the city has suffered its heaviest air attack since the start of the conflict. A military barracks was reportedly hit. In Pristina, 2 large explosions have been heard.
The first of the US Apache attack helicopters have begun arriving in Albania as part of the effort to intensify attacks on Serb forces on the ground in Kosovo. President Clinton is preparing to call up several thousand military reservists and deploy 300 more warplanes to join NATO airstrikes.
The German Chancellor...
Civilian deaths or injuries it may have caused when it hit a refugee convoy yesterday. The attack happened in the village of Meja near Jakovica in western Kosovo. Other refugees fleeing the province have been giving as yet unconfirmed reports that they were attacked near Prizren.
There was an immediate war of words after the attack, with both sides accusing the other of propaganda. 3 hours after the attack, the Serbs brought a Western news agency cameraman to the scene to record the carnage. It had been an attack from the air, an aircraft flinging high explosive at the line of farm tractors and trailers carrying a pitifully vulnerable load of ethnic Albanian refugees. The Serbs said it was the work of a reckless NATO pilot. NATO at first alleged that it was a Yugoslav Air Force plane, but in Brussels today an alliance officer said that one of 2 convoys attacked on the same road was a mixture of military and civilian vehicles. The NATO pilot broke off the attack when he realized he had civilians in his sights. In London today, the British Foreign Secretary mounted a spirited verbal counter-attack on Belgrade.
I have to say that I will not accept the criticism that has been emanating loudly from Belgrade.
Where many of the survivors of the attack were suffering from serious burns, some did say that the plane which descended on them was a NATO aircraft. But refugees who reached safety across the border in Albania during the night talked of Yugoslav aircraft attacking a refugee column. Although NATO commands the air in the region, and any Yugoslav pilot who now flies there runs the grave risk of never returning alive. Michael Sullivan, Sky News.
Well, as the convoy came under attack in the border area yesterday, Sky's Peter Sharp was in the mountainous region overlooking the area. He's now returned to Kukas in Albania and brings us this report.
The Albanian police who man the isolated border post have had a grandstand view of the NATO bombings inside southern Kosovo. We travelled up to the frontier post 6 hours from Kukas, arriving at the same time the attack on the refugee convoy was said to have taken place. Throughout the afternoon, wave after wave of NATO fighters could be seen streaming across the border. Weather conditions were good, and smoke from ground targets was clearly visible rising in the sky east of the town of Jakovica. And it was along the main road leading into the town that the column of refugees was hit. Once again, the air attacks appear to have been launched at high altitude. The Albanian police were digging in on the border, expecting further attacks. Their positions overlooked by Serb artillery on a neighboring hill. Their commander was clearly worried.
All along the border line, Serbian forces had enforced their own position, even in ground troops, even in heavy weapons.
Today, the air attacks on southern Kosovo continued uninterrupted by the claims and counterclaims surrounding the attack on the refugee convoy. Peter Sharp, Sky News at Prušet on the Albanian-Kosovo border.
Missions require split-second judgment. Spotting the target and making positive identification are not easy. Reference materials can often be sketchy at best, and even the most experienced pilot has a difficult and dangerous task.
Well, the real problem is that you're travelling at, say, 400 miles an hour. You may, in some of these aircraft, be 3 miles high. You may be releasing your weapons 10 miles away. You've got to look through a small sight to try and identify the convoy. You've also got to be worried about the air defence systems that are probably attacking you. You've got to take evasion manoeuvres. And in all of this, you've got to make sure that you're identifying the correct target, you're getting the weapon on the right place, and you're not going to cause any civilian casualties.
In air operations over Kosovo, NATO planners rely on a host of high-technology instruments: space-based satellites, high-flying reconnaissance aircraft, and reports from ground observers. But even trained observers make mistakes. In Kosovo, there are Yugoslav aircraft flying, as well as NATO types. In combat conditions, this cannot be replicated in training.
If you're on the ground with an aircraft coming over, it's quite a difficult thing to identify what sort of aircraft it is, even when you're not being attacked. If you've got bombs raining down or bullets firing at you, the last thing you think about is trying to take the aircraft number that's going over.
But ultimately, it's the attacking pilot who makes the decision. And that's why NATO is keen to have US Army Apache attack helicopters in the Balkans. Their high-tech systems can identify vehicles from 5 miles. And hidden in trees or behind hills, the pilots have time to make a positive identification. But for all that, military air action is still an imperfect art. Well, the convoys are not. There's so many imponderables here.
But it has underlined, hasn't it, the whole propaganda thing, because yesterday there was a claim that Serb MiGs were spotted in the area, that it was the Serbians responsible, NATO not making any comment. I mean, how damaging is it that it takes so long to admit a mistake like this?
Oh, I don't think it's a very long time. It's less than 24 hours. I would have thought that's not bad going by the standards of even of modern reporting. I think one of the problems that NATO's got is the fact that there is mass media interest in this, and in days of electronics communications, we do expect there to be instant answers. We can go live to the spokesman in Brussels, and live to the border with Albania. One of the problems, what we can't do, of course, is actually go into Kosovo, and we can't go and see all the sites in Kosovo that we'd like to see. And it's one of those problems in a propaganda war.
NATO admits that one of its planes accidentally dropped a bomb on a civilian vehicle in Kosovo. It said it has no way of knowing the number of casualties. Today's other headlines: the former Pakistan. There were 2 attacks. The Serbian authorities say dozens were killed near the village of Maja. Refugees arriving in Albania have confirmed several people were killed near the village of Zerze. NATO released a short statement admitting responsibility for one attack, but did not say which one it was. It stressed it was a preliminary report, and stated only one aircraft dropped a bomb on one vehicle only. It said police or military vehicles may have been around the refugee convoy at the time of the attack. The statement expressed regret for any harm caused. NATO said it could not confirm Serbian reports of the number of deaths or injuries. The controversy over the bombing of the civilian convoy did not prevent NATO pressing ahead with widespread airstrikes against targets in Yugoslavia, in one of the heaviest nights of air attacks since the conflict began. During a night of clear skies, 6 powerful explosions shook the capital, Belgrade, shattering windows and tearing doors from their frames. There have been more explosions this morning in the Kosovo capital, Pristina. Our correspondent Jim Fish reports now on the latest airstrikes and the possible implications of the attack on the refugee convoy.
The full truth has yet to emerge of what happened to this civilian convoy outside the Kosovo town of Đakovica on Wednesday. NATO is admitting only that one of its aircraft mistakenly bombed a civilian vehicle. It's not yet clear whether it was this convoy that was hit or another one. These refugees arriving in Albania on Wednesday night were from a different convoy, which they say was also bombed by unknown aircraft. Britain, although its aircraft were not involved, expressed regret for any inadvertent casualties, but directed the wider responsibility onto Belgrade. NATO attacks on Yugoslav targets despite the latest civilian casualties. Overnight, loud explosions were heard in a Belgrade suburb, with a military barracks apparently targeted. NATO says that in a conflict such as this, civilian casualties are almost inevitable. Frustrated by long periods of bad weather, which forced many aircraft to turn back rather than risk missing their targets, the alliance has been keen to step up its attacks on military targets in Kosovo. But the strategy of bombing from a safe height inevitably increases the risk of hitting the wrong targets. If the Serbs are using civilians as human shields, as NATO has suggested, the risks are of course even greater. Jim Fish, BBC News.
Sui raid che avrebbero provocato, queste sono le cifre che vengono date da Mosca, 64 civili, la morte di 64 civili e il ferimento grave di altri 20. Quindi abbiamo visto due prese di posizione completamente diverse, all'opposto, e parliamo invece di del fatto che le mediazioni e comunque la diplomazia rimane in moto. Il patriarca Alessio II ha intenzione di recarsi a Belgrado per cercare di mediare un accordo di pace. Questa è un'anticipazione fornita da una fonte del patriarcato. Dunque ci sono diverse possibilità di mediazione, anche Chernomirdin probabilmente, voi avete notizie da Belgrado, pare che possa fare questa missione e andare sia a Washington sia a Belgrado. Hai notizie in questo senso?
Dunque, tutto quello che tu hai detto era noto qua, anche se non diffuso dalla televisione jugoslava, e poi l'impatto che possa avere, Daniela, è davvero difficile. Le dichiarazioni sia di Blair sia del
Ministero degli Esteri russo.
Sì, e del Ministero degli Esteri russo hanno il sapore tipico della propaganda. Non credo che la propaganda politica a sostegno di una guerra sia un'esclusiva della Jugoslavia o della parte albanese coinvolta, è una caratteristica di chiunque sostiene le ragioni per cui questa guerra è iniziata. E quindi ovviamente poi da parte russa il contrasto non solo a difesa dei fratelli slavo-ortodossi di Jugoslavia, ma proprio a contestazione di questo ruolo della NATO, della grande NATO sceriffo del mondo che si sta imponendo. E questo è il contenzioso, lo scenario. Lo spazio di mediazione rispetto ad esempio all'arrivo del patriarca russo, che sicuramente è nell'ambito delle chiese nazionali ortodosse la figura più importante, no? Qua ogni chiesa è nazionale, ogni chiesa ha il suo patriarca che è un po' un piccolo papa, anche se non ha certo l'autorità nella cultura cattolico-cristiana, cristiano-cattolica nostra. Non sappiamo però veramente dare spazio a questi tentativi dopo che abbiamo visto fallire le proposte, l'appello altissimo del Santo Padre di Giovanni Paolo II in occasione della Pasqua cristiana, la proposta di tregua della Pasqua ortodossa. Speriamo che sia quella la strada, ma l'impressione è che non è attraverso quella via che arriverà una soluzione. L'impressione che abbiamo qua è che ognuno a questo punto si trova con le spalle al muro e nessuno vuole perdere la faccia. I bombardamenti qui sono pesanti, stanno distruggendo molto, ma non stanno colpendo un paese moderno.
Scusami, ma a proposito di questo, anche a Pristina, vero, ci sono ancora bombardamenti?
Sì, sono poco fa, Daniela, ci è arrivata la notizia di ulteriori bombardamenti, ma anche nella tarda mattinata, verso l'1:30.
Senti, rimani con noi perché ci colleghiamo con Bruxelles, c'è il briefing della NATO, vedo Sheikh che sta per cominciare.
General Giuseppe Morani from NATO played a tape of the pilot explaining his actions. We heard the pilot say he thought he was targeting Yugoslav and Serb forces whom he was observing forcing people from villages and setting their houses on fire. A little later he returned, he checked twice, and he attacked what he said was the lead vehicle in 3 dark green vehicles. But it turned out to be a tractor, a civilian, a part of a civilian convoy. Scores of lives were lost, according to Serb sources, at least 64 people, ethnic Albanians, were killed, but this cannot be independently confirmed. We have no confirmation on that from NATO. General Morani said NATO's resolve has not weakened as a result of this tragedy, and that NATO's military campaign will continue until the key objectives have been reached.
Were brought to nearby hospitals. The remaining survivors are still in shock. The Serbian investigative judge, Milenko Momcilovic, says that at least 20 people were killed in this incident alone. He says NATO was also responsible for this attack.
Gestorben. Ein 13-jähriges Mädchen erzählt, die Serben hielten uns an und bedrohten uns. Sie wollten, dass wir später sagen, dass nicht sie uns beschossen haben, sondern die NATO. Die es bis zur Grenze geschafft haben, blicken in eine ungewisse Zukunft. Zwar ist das Flüchtlingshilfswerk der Vereinten Nationen vor Ort, doch die Hilfsgüter sind knapp. Deshalb kommen jetzt neue Lieferungen auch aus Deutschland. Die Hilfsorganisation CARE startet ihren ersten Transport nach Albanien.
Unsere Kollegen von CARE vor Ort haben bereits vor Ort Decken, die noch verfügbar waren, eingekauft und ausgeteilt. Nur im Moment ist es schwierig, innerhalb von Albanien überhaupt noch Hilfsgüter zu kaufen, sodass wir jetzt gesagt haben, wir müssen von hier was tun und diesen Transport starten.
Auch in Mazedonien ist die Situation mehr als angespannt. Über 120.000 Vertriebene kamen in den vergangenen 3 Wochen ins Land. Mit Bussen werden sie auf verschiedene Lager verteilt. Die mazedonische Regierung spricht von einer außerordentlichen Belastung. Deshalb sei auch hier westliche Hilfe weiterhin vonnöten.
Die NATO hat in der Nacht wieder massiv Ziele in Jugoslawien bombardiert. Nach Angaben der amtlichen jugoslawischen Nachrichtenagentur Tanjug seien insgesamt 10 Städte angegriffen worden. Der Sachschaden sei groß und es gebe wieder Opfer. In der Hauptstadt Belgrad wurde der Industrievorort Rakovica angegriffen. Das gab das städtische Informationszentrum bekannt. Die starken Detonationen haben zahlreiche Wohnhäuser und öffentliche Objekte beschädigt. Viele Bewohner wurden durch zerbrochenes Fensterglas verletzt, meldet ein Belgrader Lokalsender. Sondersitzung im Bundestag zum Kosovo.
Thousands of Kosovars have joined, according to the KLA, since the NATO airstrikes began. But this force is undermanned and lightly equipped. Still, the 4th Brigade crossing into Kosovo maintains that theirs is a one-way trip back to their homeland. There are 2 choices, they say: win back Kosovo or die trying. Mike Betcher, CNN, on the Yugoslav-Albanian frontier.
The pilot says he hit a vehicle with a laser-guided bomb. It was, he says, one of 3 similar dark green vehicles that looked like the Serb military. Then another pilot took over, attacking more vehicles near the town of Jakovica.
Refugees have been arriving across the Albanian border, claiming they were targeted by Yugoslav planes. NATO admits there was another attack, but won't give any details about it, and there may possibly have been even a third.
Serbia is claiming this afternoon that 500 people have been killed and 4,000 injured since the NATO air raids began. They're also reporting that 8 bridges have been destroyed and 9 bridges damaged.
Accounts of the various attacks remain incomplete and contradictory. NATO produced taped evidence from the man at the controls of the F-16 involved in one of the attacks. The pilot, apparently speaking after the mission, seemed in no doubt that he was attacking a police or army unit.
So unlikely did it seem that Allied planes would attack refugees that NATO at first dismissed Belgrade's accusations as propaganda. 3 hours after the attacks, the Serbs brought a Western news agency cameraman to the area to record the carnage. There had been attacks from the air, aircraft flinging high explosive at lines of vehicles, some of them farm tractors and trailers, carrying a pitifully vulnerable load of ethnic Albanian refugees. The Serbs said it was the work of a reckless NATO pilot. NATO at first claimed that it was a Yugoslav Air Force plane, but soon withdrew the allegation. Later to acknowledge responsibility and, at the daily press briefing in Brussels, play the recorded voice of one of the pilots who'd launched the attacks.
The picture that I'm building now in this southwestern part of Kosovo is that MUP and VJ forces are methodically working themselves from the north to the south through villages, setting them ablaze and forcing all the Kosovar Albanians out of those villages.
Had no way of telling who their attackers were. They could only cling to their disbelief that their would-be saviours would kill so many of them by bombing them from the air. Michael Sullivan, Sky News.
In a pitiful condition. Some had walked 3 to 4 days, only to be bombed by the military force meant to save them. This old man still splattered with the blood of those who died. They bombed once, and then they bombed twice, but they didn't hit us. Then they came very low, and a bomb hit the driver of a tractor. 2 men were killed right away, and some women died by the roadside. Lots were injured. I can't hear anymore. I was deafened by it.
When the planes came over, all we could do was lie on top of the children and try and protect them. The noise was awful.
Most here refused to accept that NATO aircraft carried out the attack, blaming it all on the Serb Air Force. While attention is focused on yesterday's tragedy, aid workers here say it must not be forgotten that the ethnic cleansing of southern Kosovo is continuing. Another 1,500 people arrived in this camp alone in the last few hours. Peter Sharp, Sky News.
The reports from Belgrade that they were on their way home when the airstrike happened aren't true. In this tent, they were listening to the news about who was to blame for the disaster. Fazkela Batushi's husband and 18-year-old daughter Valentina were killed in the air attack. 15-year-old son is in deep shock. He's hardly spoken since it happened. When the attack finished, she said, I looked up and I saw my daughter lying badly wounded on the tractor. I went to her, but she couldn't talk to me. Mehmet Bayrami said the warplane dropped 2 bombs on either side of the column of refugees. Then it came back and dropped another right on them. They seemed almost paralyzed, stunned by the ruin of their lives. 8 people who'd been traveling with them were killed. Like all the refugees, Rukman Bayram from the next tent said there were no Serb soldiers or military vehicles in their convoy. Her 12 grandchildren and 2 daughters-in-law survived, but one son, his arm blown off, is in hospital in Kosovo, and the other is dead. I went to him and I put his jacket under his head. I put a blanket over him, and then I watched him die. In this camp, there are dreadful stories of terrible suffering. These people are lost and bewildered, and they face a very uncertain future. The only good thing that can be said today is that they've reached safety and they're being well cared for. Jeremy Bone, BBC News, in northern Albania.
In another development, clear evidence that NATO is continuing its air campaign. In the capital of Montenegro, Podgorica, what appeared to be a stealth fighter was seen flying over the city, and at least one plume of smoke is now erupting from the area of the military airports. Our correspondent there reports that at least 6 explosions have been heard. It's not clear yet what sort of damage there is. This is the first attack on Podgorica in about a week. NATO said it would avoid attacking Montenegro, if at all possible, since it was staying neutral in the war and was refusing to support its bigger partner, Serbia, in the Yugoslav Federation.
In Albania.
I never could believe that it's going to be like this. There's so many refugees, and I thought it's going to be an epidemiological crisis and a lot of children.
Over 3 weeks after this crisis began, it isn't easy even finding where his countrymen are now located, scattered as they are throughout this mountainous country. Once there, the scenes are heart-wrenching. Babies and children sick with fever, diarrhea. A makeshift clinic is quickly established by Dr. Gonjabala and nurses from the International Medical Corps, who bring out a battery of donated drugs.
Every second of them have some upper respiratory disease. Perhaps there is a flu, there is a throat.
So you need drugs here?
I need drugs. They are missing the drugs.
Mothers, newborns, the elderly line up to see the doctor. Surprised but grateful, he speaks their dialect. What's wrong with most of them?
Most of them from yesterday having diarrhea. So we are going to check everybody here.
For diarrhea?
Yeah, for diarrhea. And we are going to see if there are others with diarrhea.
A major part of the healing process for people here is just knowing someone is there, caring with a soothing word and a smile.
Dr. Džambali agrees with nearly every other doctor dealing with this crisis that it is the psychological trauma that these people have suffered that is the most difficult to treat, yet poses the biggest problem for the future.
As he makes his rounds, he says it isn't their diseases, their living conditions, but their tales of horror that will haunt him.
Two mothers that I saw there, they have been crying and screaming. They left their children. I think after he make a deliver of baby, she got no milk, everybody was running, and up there somewhere they left the children.
Those wounds, he says, he cannot heal. So Dr. Džambali does what he can, one patient at a time. Eileen O'Connor, CNN, Albany.
Particular unease over the new exodus. The Macedonian president warned that his country, which has already accepted more than 100,000 Kosovo Albanians, could not handle the new influx. And he urged other countries to share.
Let's go first to Albania to join Peter Sharp. Peter, what was the reaction there in the camps when the news came through that NATO said it was the one that bombed that refugee convoy?
Absolute total disbelief. There wasn't a single person in this camp who could credit the fact that NATO would in fact bomb them. But there are major discrepancies now in the reports I've been getting from the survivors here and the witness from the pilot yesterday. What the people are saying is that they were on the road, they started early in the morning, and by midday they'd been on the road a few hours when the first aircraft came over, and this bombed them on the right. The bombs landed in the field to the right of the column. Half an hour later, a second plane came over and further bombs were dropped on the left-hand field adjoining the convoy. And it was half an hour later when a further plane, traveling very low, circled once and bombed the middle of this refugee column. There were no military vehicles in the column. They say it was made up solely of tractors and people on foot. The Serb troops were there almost immediately afterwards and said to them, "This is what NATO's done to you." Well, as I said before, that was greeted by total disbelief.
Disbelief, anger as well, possibly, I would imagine. But is there a shift now? Is there hatred of NATO? Is there a shift in where the fear is directed?
No, not at all. I mean, they can't comprehend that NATO has done this, so their anger is directed solely at the people who have driven them from their homes. Don't forget, I mean, we have been concentrating quite rightly on this tragic accident on Wednesday, but the ethnic cleansing hasn't stopped. These people continue to pour across the border. Yet late yesterday afternoon, 3,000 women came across. They'd been